करता क्या है?
He has given the space, the railways, the airport, which he has no experience also. So the country's interest has been compromised.
Government has been very clearly supporting few industrial groups, including Adani's industrial group.
Target Adani, streaming now.
BrahMos, stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The warship killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
फटाफट Hello and welcome. You watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Our big focus on the show today is on Russia, President Putin and his Betanwa, Yevgeny Prigozhin. A month after an unprecedented challenge was mounted to Russian President Vladimir Putin's authority by way of an armed mutiny, the world is wondering where Yevgeny Prigozhin, the man who led that mutiny, is and what kind of fate awaits him, given that he's now widely seen as Putin's enemy number one. Putin may wait to exact revenge, says US Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns. Speaking to the Aspen Security Forum, the CIA chief has said, "What we are seeing is a very complicated dance, and Putin is trying to buy time while he works out how to deal with Prigozhin," adding that Putin may still seek retribution against the man who plotted and led the failed coup. Now, Yevgeny Prigozhin is the head of the Wagner mercenary group who led the mutiny against Putin last month. The CIA chief says that mutiny exposed significant weaknesses in the power structure that Putin has built. Prigozhin has moved around a fair bit in the weeks since the rebellion. He was seen in the Belarusian capital of Minsk recently and later spotted in Russia as well. This mercenary group still has value for Russia's leadership in places like Africa, Libya and Syria, and so it is likely that Putin will try and separate the group from its leader. William Burns said in this interview, "Putin is someone who generally thinks that revenge is a dish best served cold. In my experience, Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback. So I would be surprised if Prigozhin escapes further retribution." Earlier this month, US President Joe Biden suggested there was a possibility that the Wagner boss could be poisoned. He quipped, and I quote, "If I were Prigozhin, I'd be careful about what I ate. I'd keep my eye on my menu." The CIA director echoed that line, saying, "If I were Prigozhin, I would not fire my food taster." Interestingly, America's intelligence agency had advanced knowledge of the mutiny. That too has been confirmed by the CIA boss. Burns added that senior Russian army general Sergei Surovikin, who's reported to have known about the Wagner mutiny in advance, does not currently have freedom of movement in Russia. The mutiny was the most direct assault that Putin has seen in his 23 years in power. Prigozhin directly challenged the Kremlin's justification for the war in Ukraine, saying it had been built on lies. Now, the CIA chief goes on to say, "It's most remarkable that the Russian president felt compelled to strike a deal with a man who used to be his caterer." Prigozhin is often referred to as Putin's chef, as he first came to prominence after providing catering services to Putin and the military, before founding the Wagner Group. Putin has projected an image of himself as a strongman whose grip over Russia is vice-like and unquestionable. Therefore, the 36 hours of the mutiny have left many in the country with the question of whether the emperor had no clothes, or at least why is it taking him so long to get dressed, said the CIA chief, adding that this event would have resurrected deeper questions in the Russian elite about Putin's judgment, which have been there since his decision to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. If Ukraine makes further advances on the battlefield, then that could lead more Russians to pay attention to Prigozhin's critique of the war, according to Burns. Now, his comments echoed remarks that had earlier been made by Sir Richard Moore, the head of Britain's secret intelligence service MI6. Moore said Putin's government was beset by venality, infighting and callous incompetence, and the aftermath of Prigozhin's mutiny had been humiliating to Putin. The CIA chief also said there were signs that Russia might be considering a false flag operation by attacking shipping in the Black Sea and then blaming it on the Ukrainians. So, what do experts make of these claims that have been made by the CIA chief? Some very interesting statements there. Let's decode these with our panel of experts. Joining me on the show tonight, Ambassador J.K. Tripathi, former diplomat. Major General Sanjay Meston, defense expert, is also with us. And we're also hoping to be joined in a moment by Ambassador Manju Seth, also a former diplomat. Ambassador Tripathi, let me start with you. What do you make of a series of very intriguing statements that have been made by the CIA chief? He says he has confirmed what was suspected all along, that the CIA had prior information or intelligence about this mutiny that obviously caught Putin off guard. There are many who've already pointed out that this mutiny or failed mutiny, whatever you choose to call it, has not only been humiliating for Putin, it has actually exposed the chink in his armor, exposed some significant weaknesses in his power structure. And then, interestingly, William Burns goes on to say that what we are seeing is a very complicated dance. Putin is trying to buy time while he works out how to deal with Prigozhin. Putin will wait perhaps to exact revenge on Yevgeny Prigozhin. How do you see these remarks, Ambassador Tripathi?
See, Neha, firstly, thank you very much for adding me up in the show. Firstly, the very statement of CIA chief that CIA had prior knowledge. I'll go one step beyond that and say CIA not even has prior knowledge, but CIA also supported Yevgeny Prigozhin for this, just to divert the attention or increase the inconveniences, I'll say, increase the inconveniences. But CIA failed. In less than 36 hours, it has been quenched and normalcy had been returned. So, and then Richard Moore is giving a statement, William Burns is giving a statement, others are giving a statement. We must not see we must see take these statements with a pinch of salt, because they are not 100% correct, because they might be a part of information warfare or misinformation warfare, I will say. Why will CIA reveal this thing that CIA had the prior knowledge of this? Why will CIA reveal this? Does CIA reveal everything that it has in its system? No. So we should take it with a word of caution. Secondly, as you said, that chinks are visible in the in Putin's armor. Yes, they might, but this was not as big a problem as it has been projected. It has been, I think, blown out of the proportion. Yevgeny Prigozhin is a very small fry in Putin's armor, in Putin's army. Right? He claimed that he has 25,000 persons under his command, and he had big business backing him. His business of restaurants or online floating restaurants, grocery business, this and that. But then he is not he is not a powerful threat to Putin, because Putin being at the helm of the affairs for the last 23 years, and Putin being a very, I mean, competent strategist, I don't think that it will have any big repercussion in Putin's popularity. Second, thirdly, and lastly, yes, Putin will be waiting for time, but Putin will, yes, remove Yevgeny very smoothly uh, without any clutter. He will be removed as and when Putin thinks it is. I'm not praising Putin, but the man has got a very brilliant mind, and for the last so many months, I will say, American media, Western media has been maligning his popularity, has been claiming that Putin had been given poison, Putin is bad, Putin's health is bad, Putin is not good, Putin is weak, Putin has left Russia. All sort of propaganda war was going on. But we can see Putin is still there, and he was getting, and Prigozhin had just 2 days back, he has addressed his people, supposedly 600 members of the Wagner group in the southern Belarusian place called Sel, and where he said that we must not go in for war again. We will focus out. We will shift our focus to Africa. And in Africa, in Central African nation, the Central African nation, he had got a big stake. So hopefully they will be, and yet his fighters have fought in Libya, etc., etc. So hopefully he will, either he will be removed from the scene by moving physically or relocating in Africa, and operating from there, or very peacefully somewhere in Siberian archipelagos. So that is what I think, Neha.
You know, okay, you make some interesting points. You know, I don't think it is anybody's case, just to clarify, that Yevgeny Prigozhin is a very important man in Russia's scheme of things, or that he can pose a great threat to Putin. You know, the mutiny may not have the kind of ramifications for Putin as some in the West would have us believe, but I think the bigger question really is, what ramifications is that failed mutiny likely to have for Prigozhin? You know, because there are many who say that he is a dead man walking now that he is Putin's enemy number one. And if I could just once again quickly quote William Burns, the CIA chief, he says Putin is someone who generally thinks that revenge is a dish best served cold. In my experience, Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback. So I would be surprised if Prigozhin escapes further retribution. And honestly, I think that is something most people would agree with, given Putin's track record. We've seen what's happened to a lot of his political opponents, critics, and dissenters in Russia. We've seen how they've been treated over the years and decades. And also, on a lighter note, if I may quote the US President Joe Biden, he recently said, if I were Prigozhin, I would be careful what I ate. I would keep my eye on my menu. And the CIA director has also said, if I were Prigozhin, I would not fire my food taster. We all know what the insinuation is. But Major General Sanjay Meston, let me come to you now. I'd like your response to some of the other things that the CIA chief has said in this interview. He says that Putin is always projected an image of himself as a strong man whose grip over Russia is vice-like and unquestionable. Therefore, this particular mutiny not only left him humiliated, but it left many in Russia with the question of, and I'm quoting William Burns here, whether the emperor had no clothes, or at least why it is taking him so long to get dressed. Burns goes on to say this would have resurrected deeper questions in the Russian elite about Putin's judgment, because there have already been multiple questions about his judgment since his decision to launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And if Ukraine makes further advances on the battlefield, then that could lead more Russians to pay attention to Prigozhin's critique of the war. Is that an assessment that you would agree with?
Neha, I would have my own comments because it's not a necessity to agree with each statement of the CIA chief.
No, of course not. I'm just asking what your assessment is, of course.
Yeah, I'm giving my assessment. So my assessment is, firstly, yes, let's analyze the ground facts. The first fact is that, a planned mutiny had occurred. It is no doubt. It was flashed across, even the Russian television was showing that. And the day mutiny occurred, President Putin, he was quite aggressive in his posture. In fact, his speech was very, very aggressive. First time, perhaps, he was in that shape. So what I'm trying to say is that definitely it was a cause of concern and an embarrassment to President Putin. There is no doubt. However, now coming on to certain other aspects, was it a planned mutiny or was it spontaneous? See, his statements were very clear, Prigozhin's statements, and that had especially emanated after the directive from the Ministry of Defense that all the Wagner forces, the cadres, would be compulsory to be joining the Russian armed forces. So they will be within, and therefore Prigozhin felt that his hold would obviously be loosened, because then he is no one. He is not controlling any cadres. So that was the sore point. And perhaps there was some kind of a discord amongst the generals, which sometimes does happen. You know, nothing can be perfect in any organization. Putin has got so many generals, and General Servokin perhaps has some kind of a role in this. So whether the CIA was aware about it or not, nor they are claiming that they were aware about it, is out of the purview. But something has actually happened on ground, and it has caused embarrassment to President Putin. So that is point one. Now, point two is Prigozhin has been important, because recently President Putin had called him, and I think about 35 to 40 of important cadres in this Wagner group for a meeting.
That's right. And this meeting happened at the Kremlin exactly 5 days after this mutiny.
Yeah. So, and I think it lasted for about 2 to 3 hours. So that means Prigozhin is important in overall affairs, in the strategic concept of the Russian. They have been used successfully. See, after all, how was Crimea captured? It was captured in 2014 by the Wagner. They were most instrumental. What they have been doing in Africa, what they have been doing in Syria. So, and the best part is of having a Wagner group is that there is plausibility, deniability, which is always there, so which gives them a leverage. Now, in this case also, they were being used effectively. Now, why have they been sent to Belarus? Obviously, Putin had to show that he's taken some firm action. The MOD was against the Wagner group because of large number of issues. We will not go back into those details. And I think Putin planned, and that is how, the Belarusian president came, and the deal was struck that the cadres can be sent to Belarus. For a large number of days, it was not known where the cadres are, but now it has been confirmed that they have arrived at Belarus. And now, incidentally, they are also undergoing training, joint training with the Belarusian army, which is again very surprising. So why it is happening is that Putin realizes they have the potential, they have the capabilities, and therefore they must be used effectively. Revenge is something which we'll talk about later. So first is the utility of Wagner, and the Prigozhin's charismatic leadership on the Wagner. So they have been now inducted in Belarus. Now, why they are there? It could be for multifarious reasons. One is, I think a front is always open up from the Belarusian side, because if the counter-offensive goes quite successful in the eastern and southern parts of occupied territory of Russia, I think then they will have to get some pressure from the Belarusian territory if this possibility exists. The threat in being would be there. Next is the very sensitive Suwalk corridor which exists between, basically it is, I would say in the Poland area, which is about 65 kilometers. That's a very sensitive corridor which links the NATO or the EU with the Baltic states up to Finland. So that is a corridor open, which is very sensitive. On the west is Kaliningrad and on the east is Belarus. So therefore they can also be used for some kind of an activity. What those activities can be, we have seen in Africa, they have been used for a number of reasons, but one of the focus was also for regime change or having some opponents within a system so that, they create confusion. Therefore, the targets could be Lithuania, Latvia, and obviously Poland. Some kind of inducting of these Wagner cadres over there to create dissent with the existing leadership in these three countries. That also is a possibility. So what I'm trying to highlight is the importance of Wagner to President Putin is there. Now he will keep using them. Now what does he do with Prigozhin? I told you, he has a leadership impact. So he would not like to replace him. So he will use him extensively. And the day he feels that all his military objectives or strategic objectives have been met, President Putin will definitely keep what he has done, and at an appropriate time, he could be eliminated. And there are large number of ways to eliminate or get someone off track without even
Well, we've seen how Putin does that. We've seen that on
Yeah.
multiple occasions in the past. But it's interesting. You are talking about how Prigozhin, there is no doubt, Prigozhin has been extremely useful for Putin all along. You're saying he still has use for him. The question really is, haven't things changed drastically since the 23rd of June, since Prigozhin decided to mount the most serious challenge to Putin's authority in his entire 23-year reign? That really is the question. We will dwell on that in a greater detail in a moment, but let me now go across to Ambassador Manju Seth. Ambassador Seth, at the start of the show, I quoted in detail what CIA Chief William Burns has said in a recent interview about Prigozhin, his recent mutiny against Putin, what it means for Putin's authority, what it means for the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, even though I think we can all agree that that mutiny left Putin significantly humiliated and embarrassed before the international community, whether it has left him significantly weakened as the leader at the helm of affairs in Russia, the jury on that is still out. Ambassador Tripathi makes an interesting point, disagreeing with the CIA chief who says that many in the Russian elite are now questioning Putin's judgment, questioning whether he's still fully in control. Ambassador Tripathi says that a large part of it is information warfare and psychological warfare mounted by the United States and Western media against Putin and Russia. What is your take? Do you believe that this mutiny has indeed left Putin significantly weaker in his own country and in the ongoing battle against Ukraine? Or do you believe that this is essentially a Western-controlled narrative? Ma'am, could you please unmute yourself?
I believe, yes, that it is only in part a narrative building by the West, but it has weakened Putin considerably. And we know, and there have been reports of how many elite Russians are also, citizens are also questioning this never-ending war in Ukraine. So there have been some dissidents, there has been some voices of dissent, but muted so far. And I think with this mutiny, it further was an indication because, the Wagner group was a very strong player in the whole Ukraine offensive and the Ukraine war. And many of their sort of exploits on behalf of the Russian army, I think, were very successful. And so I think the Wagner group has been very active. And the fact that suddenly Prigozhin has decided to question everything because he had some differences with some generals, I think that in itself, and if you recall, Prigozhin was very close to Putin. He was, his sort of, they say in his catering.
Putin's chef.
Yeah, chef. So, he was very close to him. And so for him to turn around like this and suddenly, challenge Putin and challenge his authority and talk of regime change when he was marching towards Moscow. And then I think that's when the negotiations and other things got in place, and I think they spoke to him and they told, and the whole thing about him going to Belarus, etc. But his elimination, as mentioned by the general, I agree, it will come at an appropriate time, given the history of how Putin doesn't forget people who have, who have gone against him. He doesn't forget easily. So it may be at an appropriate time that he will be eliminated when he's no longer useful for Putin and his aims or his ambitions in Ukraine and even in general. So I think that will. So till then, I think Prigozhin is safe. But the day President Putin decides or feels that Prigozhin is no longer serving his purpose, serving his views, or serving away according to his views, I think that may be not a very positive thing for him. But at the same time, the way the Ukraine war is going on and on and on, and the role that the Wagner group played, and now that we are seeing the Ukrainian army has increased its attacks and its counteroffensive, and seems to be getting some successes here and there. The role of the Wagner group, it cannot be overlooked, and that is why I think they're trying to, garner or get them into the Russian army and to have training with the Belarusians, and maybe have a counter or a line of defense or counteroffensive on the Belarusian side of Ukraine. So I think till then, Prigozhin will be sort of allowed, should I say, no harm come to him till then.
All right, honestly, I am constrained to say how much time does Prigozhin really have? I've been asking this question since the 23rd of June. Is Prigozhin a dead man walking? I think one thing we can all agree with the CIA chief on is that Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback. Ambassador Tripathi, let me come back to you this point. This whole debate about Prigozhin's usefulness, I don't think there is any debate on how useful he was to Putin till the 23rd of June. The question is, how do things stand today vis-a-vis Putin and Prigozhin? Yes, the two met at the Kremlin for several hours, 5 days after the mutiny. No further details were offered by the Kremlin. One wonders what happened in that meeting. One wonders what Putin might have said to Prigozhin. There has been so much back and forth on whether he was in Russian soil or Belarusian soil. But that apart, when somebody says that as long as Prigozhin continues to have some kind of utility or usefulness for Putin, he will probably, be around. And then once Putin decides that he's had enough, maybe we will hear of some mysterious incident leading to his elimination. But my point simply is, whatever purpose Prigozhin may have served up till now, would it not be correct to say, sir, that all of that changed on the day when he decided to march on Moscow and present, as I keep saying, the biggest challenge ever to Putin's authority? in all these decades that he has been in power? Has that equation not changed completely?
Well, Neha, I would say that has changed completely. Yes, it had been the Putin's image has seen some erosion, of course, due to this, but not a substantial change, not a substantial problem for Putin, because you see, immediately after this failed mutiny, Chechens, Wagner group was replaced by Chechens. So who are equally fierce in their fighting skills. Now the question is that after 5 days after the failed mutiny, both Putin and Yevgeny Prigozhin supposedly met somewhere in Kremlin. They discussed what discussed. It was what they discussed was not out. But yes, certainly my guess will be that that after the mutiny had been very wisely, very quickly quashed, maybe Putin called Prigozhin just to say that, look, hey, perspectives that you have are different from that I have, and you should not do anything till the war is over, which is a common fight for us, common thing for us. And then maybe he would have given some carrot to him, or maybe he would have shown some stick to him that, look, if you further go get bigger to your boot, then I will have no problem in eliminating you. And Putin is known for the last 2 decades to be a very ruthless dictator and who never fails to revenge. So with this, I think Prigozhin had utility for Putin, was useful for Putin, but not indispensable. And as it is seen that after Wagner was removed from the stage, the Chechen groups came. So I think now with passage of time, this Prigozhin's utility is diminishing by the day, and then I don't think in the future Prigozhin will be of any use to Putin, as Prigozhin himself has said that, okay, in his address to his troops, that, okay, let us concentrate on Central African Republic, where he has some mistakes in mining and other things. So I don't think Putin will be very much affected by this. Had it been prolonged, then yes, shock, or you can say the jolt to Putin's popularity or Putin's power or Putin's perception of Putin's power would have been tremendous, but not now. So
Yes.
I don't think it's going to affect very much adversely.
Okay. And the question really is not just about Prigozhin's utility. It is really about how the equation between the two leaders who were once close allies has changed since that mutiny, and whether Putin continues to see Prigozhin as a serious threat, or at the very least as a nuisance. Many, of course, since the 23rd of June, have advised Prigozhin to be careful about what he eats. Many have also said he should be careful around windows. But coming to another issue, Major General Sanjay Meston, for several weeks, or at least several days after this mutiny, the top Russian military generals all but vanished from public view, leading to a lot of speculation. I want your thoughts on some of the other points that have been made by the CIA chief William Burns. He says senior Russian army general Sergei Surovikin who is reported to have known about the Wagner mutiny in advance, does not currently have quote-unquote freedom of movement in Russia. I wonder what your thoughts on that are. Also, the CIGF says there are signs that Russia might be considering a false flag operation by attacking ships in the Black Sea and then blaming it on the Ukrainians. As an army man, how do you see this?
Neha, my analysis is, firstly, regarding General Servukin, yes, there are confirmed reports that he has not been actually seen, and where is he, no one knows, whether he is behind the bars. Another point to note is, recently, the commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army, Major General Popolov, was also dismissed. Why? Because he made a very, very clear-cut statement that the army top brass has betrayed the soldiers who are fighting. So what I'm trying to highlight is that let us not be surprised, because this war, many generals, including Prigozhin, felt that this was not a justifiable war. And once a war, people start feeling that it is not a justified war, therefore there are dissent among the top generals, and similarly within the rank and file also at times there is dissent. There have been huge number of casualties, very, very large number of casualties in the Russian armed forces, much more casualties which Russia sustained with their 10-year deployment in Afghanistan. So that is the kind of casualties they have had. Many generals have lost their lives. Even the soldiers who are dying in a country like India, where we respect the martyrs, we have not seen any kind of videos or anything, where the martyrs are being given respect in their villages and top people are coming to their funeral. We have not seen that. So there is some kind of a dissent, and let us not be surprised. Today, President Putin is not in a happy state of affairs. See, someone took the lead. Who was that someone? The most close confidant, Prigozhin. Certain generals have some kind of a dissent, and history teaches us many examples of very, very authoritative leaders. At times, even if you see Julius Caesar, what happened to him. So any possibility exists today. Putin is not in a very comfortable state. Tomorrow, some generals can even ditch him. Obviously, one major general who was commanding, and mind you, he was commanding in Zaporizhia area. That was a huge area, which is a very sensitive area. So people are giving out this dissent. So all these things leads us to one question, that the senior military leadership in the Russian armed forces, except for the defense minister and General Gerasimov, probably they appear to be on one grid. There seems to be some kind of a disconnect between the top generals, which will have consequences later in the war, and which is having. That is point one. Point two is, now you have asked about this, false flag operation. Yes, that now possibility exists. See, we must remember, lot of firing has been done for 4 consecutive nights on Odessa from the ships, from the Russian ships which are operating in Black Sea, and also from missiles which are deployed, especially in Crimea. And they have used one of the best missiles, that is the KH-22 missiles, which are also known as kitchen missiles, and of course the Onyx missiles. And the Ukrainian AD system has not been very effective in their detection and destruction. So this is now a big cause of concern. So here the Russians have a great superiority in the Black Sea, and therefore now their intent is they have targeted the grains, and now grains has also become a major issue, which is going to impact most of the countries in the world, and especially global south, which is taking out at least 20% of these grains. The poorer nations which are in Africa and Middle East and so forth, including Afghanistan. And the bulk of the grains incidentally goes to China, to Turkey, to Italy. So it is going to have an impact. Now, what President Putin has stated, that any ship operating and landing in this thing, it will be taken as a ship carrying military hardware for Ukrainian army. Now, with this kind of a thing, this is now becoming a big problem, and it may happen that one of the civil ships of any nation can be targeted. And if that happens, obviously, the truth will never come out who's done it, and the blame game will go on Ukraine. And therefore, this will be again deflection. We must not forget Kremlin was attacked. The topmost dome of Kremlin with the Russian flag was attacked. So all these kind of things are happening. Crimea bridge has been attacked. So this is causing a great alarm for the President Putin. And if now he does some action which he has stated in very strong words, and why I was talking about the Belarusian and the Wagner joint drills being conducted in Belarus, because President Putin has himself today made a statement that the western portion of Poland was actually a gift during the Stalin era. It has got a lot of meaning. It has come just today. So that is perhaps the utility of Wagner Group, and the some kind of a possibility exists that of course time will tell why they are being trained there. Again, the time will tell. So all options are open which are highlighted. But this flag, false flag operation is a likelihood, and if it happens, the consequences will be very grave again for the entire world. And whichever country loses its ship, supposing a civil ship,
Right.
so that will have again a consequence, because today President Putin is also cautious. He knows there are a large number of neutral nations which are not voting against him in United Nations. But tomorrow, if the tide changes, it can happen other way. These so-called other nations who are actually neutral, they could vote against him. So it's a very tricky situation. And I think each day how it unfolds, we have to wait and watch. But yes, but this threat has been made. It is a pertinent threat, control, and let's also not forget that Odessa, if it is blocked, Ukraine retains the possibility of diverting its grains through Romania, through Bulgaria port, and if that happens, yet they will achieve their aim. So is Russia ready to target any of these ships going to Bulgaria?
Exactly, considering that it's already pulled out of the Black Sea grain deal, could Russia resort to something like this, a false flag operation targeting some of the ships? As you said, that is going to have global ramifications, and it could also turn the tide against Putin even further vis-a-vis some of his own friends and allies. Ambassador Manju Seth, I'll give you the last word. Where do you think the Russia-Ukraine war is currently headed, given that, we've seen how the Crimea bridge was attacked for the second time recently in less than a year? Obviously, Kiev was blamed by Putin deciding to halt the Black Sea grain deal. Fact of the matter is, most would say that the war hasn't really gone Russia's way. Putin had made the grand declaration that this war would be over in 2 weeks, and yet here we are discussing it in the 17th month. Do you agree with the CIA chief that Putin has a lot to worry about at the moment? Or do you believe that he is significantly in control both of Russia and of this war in Ukraine? What is your overall assessment?
I would say that the Ukrainian war has definitely not gone Putin's way and the way he thought it would go. And he, of course, as you also mentioned, he said 2 weeks, and then they said in 2 months. But it didn't happen, and it's still continuing. And so his overall image, should I say, has taken a hit. His overall standing, I think, within the country also has taken a hit, and he is in a position of weakness, so to speak, I feel. And it is something that has impacted his reactions also, and I think that may be one of the reasons that no action was taken against Prigozhin, given the current fast, the changes in the war and the way things are going, because his army, Wagner's army, or his mercenaries have gone with him, most of them, and that's why Putin wanted them to come into to join the Russian army to be Russian soldiers. But the Russian soldiers, or the Russian chiefs, army chiefs, or the defense generals and all, I think they are against that. They don't want these sort of so-called mercenaries to come into the army. So I think all these contradictions and these counter sort of things are at play, contrary things are at play. And I think Putin does need to understand that the war needs to end, but he needs to acknowledge that things are not what he wanted, and he needs to course correct, I think.
He needs to course correct, but the trouble with autocrats is they rarely do. The world has already paid a very heavy price for this war, not just Ukraine. It's anybody's guess how this war is going to pan out in the days, weeks and months ahead. But one thing we can all agree on is that it hasn't gone Russia's way thus far, and clearly the world is waiting with bated breath for this war to come to an end. We of course don't know when that's going to happen, and what happens to Prigozhin next is another million-dollar question. On that note, Ambassador Tripathi, Ambassador Manju Seth, Major General Sanjay Meston, thank you so much for joining us on this show and sharing your perspective with us on this story. All right, time for us to take a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere, there's more on the other side. Stay tuned.
इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हैं जो कि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं
Coaching is now starting from grade